Anne Frank was a Jewish girl who became famous for the diary she wrote during the Second World War. Why did Anne become so famous? Anne is famous because of the diary she kept during World War II. She is a good writer, for example, on what it is like to grow up in hiding and how she thinks about herself and the world around her. Although she was desperate and sad sometimes, Anne stayed positive and optimistic. When does Anne get her diary? The diary is given to Anne by her parents, Otto and Edith Frank, for her 13th birthday on June 12, 1942. She picked it out herself in a neighbourhood bookshop. Who is Kitty? At first, Anne wrote to many fictional friends, like Pop, Kitty, Emmy, Peen, Connie, Lou, Jet and Marianne. Some of these are names from books by Sissy van Marksveld, a Dutch writer. In the end, Anne decided on just one fictional friend, Kitty. What was Anne's life like before she went into hiding? Anne was born in the German city of Frankfurt am Main. She had a sister, Margot, who was 3 years older. When Hitler and his Nazi party came into power in 1933, the situation for Jews became worse.
Jews have to wear a Jewish star. Jews have to hand in their bicycles. Jews are not allowed in the tram. Jews are not allowed to ride in cars. Jews must attend Jewish schools, and so on and so forth.
Anne's parents, Otto and Edith, decided to flee to the Netherlands. They settled in Amsterdam here on Merwedeplein. Anne soon felt at home. She went to school, learned Dutch and made new friends. 6 years later, war broke out across Europe. In 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland, and in 1940, the German army occupied the Netherlands. The Nazi occupiers made life increasingly difficult for Jews.
I feel bad for lying in a warm bed, while my dearest friends are out there somewhere, thrown or fallen to the ground. And that only because they are Jews.
Summer of 1942, after Anne's sister, Margot, was ordered to report for a so-called labour camp, the Frank family went into hiding behind Otto's business on the Prinsengracht. They were joined there later by the Van Pels family and Fritz Pfeffer. The 8 people in hiding were helped by loyal staff and friends of Otto's, Miep and Jan Hies, Johan Voskuil and his daughter Bep, Victor Kugler and Johannes Kleiman. For how long was Anne in hiding? Anne was in hiding from July 6, 1942 until August 4, 1944, a total of 761 days, a little over 2 years. Who else was in hiding with Anne? Anne hides with her parents, Otto and Edith, her sister Margot, Herman and August Van Pels and their son Peter, and the dentist Fritz Pfeffer. Herman Van Pels was one of her father's employees. Fritz Pfeffer was an acquaintance. What was Anne's personality like? Anne was bubbly. She liked to joke and she loved to be the centre of attention. In the hiding place, she discovered she is actually 2 Annes, a superficial one and a serious one. The superficial Anne is the clown who loves to laugh about dirty jokes. The serious Anne thinks about herself and the world around her. In her last diary entry, she regretted not yet having been able to show her serious side to the people around her. Was Anne bored in the secret hiding place? No. Anne usually had plenty of things to do. She loved to write in her diary the most, but she also did other things. She studied a lot. She learned French, English, German, geometry, algebra, history, geography, mythology, and biology. And she loved to read, especially biographies, books on history, and sometimes a novel. She listened to the radio with the others to hear the latest news on the war, but she also listened to music. Of course, there were all kinds of chores to be done. And sometimes she did office work for the helpers. Didn't Anne ever get bored? Yes, of course she did. In her diary, she wrote that she finds Sundays especially boring. The adults slept all morning, and the helpers didn't stop by for a chat. Anne slept late too, so Sunday would be over quicker. Who betrayed Anne Frank? It is not certain that the occupants of the hiding place were betrayed. There could have been another reason for the raid by the SD, the Nazi Secret Service. Until now, there have only been theories, but no evidence. It is still being researched. At what age did Anne die? Anne lived to be 15 years old. In February 1945, she died of typhus in the concentration camp Bergen-Belsen. An appeal from the Dutch government in London inspired Anne to rework her diary entries into a book. Before she had finished, however, their hiding place was discovered, and all 8 were captured on the 4th of August 1944. They were deported to the concentration and death camp Auschwitz-Birkenau. Miep Gies and Bep Voskuil, 2 of the helpers, found the diaries Anne had left behind. Miep kept them in case Anne ever came back. But she didn't come back. In February 1945, Anne and Margot died of typhus in appalling conditions in the concentration camp Bergen-Belsen. Anne was 15. Of the 8 people, only Anne's father, Otto, survived the war. When he read Anne's diaries after the war, they made a deep impression. He discovered how much writing had meant to her.
No one who doesn't write can know how fine it is. And if I don't have the talent to write for newspapers or books, well then, I can always go on writing for myself.
Otto read how Anne had hoped to publish a book, so he carried out her wish. Anne's story about life in hiding and the war is read all over the world. Her diary has been translated into more than 70 languages. The hiding place is now a museum and welcomes more than 1 million visitors a year.
Every year, more than 1 million people from all over the world come to visit the Anne Frank house, especially young people. In a diary Anne Frank wrote, "I will make my voice heard." Her fate reminds us of the tragic events of the past, but her diary and her voice inspires us to work for a better future. My name is Ronald Leopold. I'm the Executive Director of the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam. What you can see on this picture, which was taken by KLM Aerocargo Service in 1949, is a part of the historic city of Amsterdam. With one house highlighted, it is 263 Prinsengracht. It is a house very similar to all the other houses in the inner city of Amsterdam, but it hides a special history. It was in this house, in the annex in the back, that Anne Frank, her family and 4 other persons were in hiding for persecution from the Nazis. We're here at the warehouse on the ground floor of the Anne Frank house, and this is where a visit to the museum starts. It starts with an introduction video where we give information to our visitors about the Second World War and about the Holocaust. It is the context and the background of the life of Anne Frank. The museum is called the Anne Frank House, but actually it is not a house where Anne Frank lived. These were her father's business premises, where eventually the hiding place was organized. Her father was managing director of Opekta. It was a business manufacturing jam. The hiding place was upstairs at the 2nd floor in the back, in the annex of this house. And where we are now is the warehouse on the ground floor. This place eventually meant also a risk to the family because people were working here while upstairs all the people were in hiding. Probably the most famous bookcase in the world covered the entrance to the hiding place. It worked like a door, turning on hinges and covering the entrance here. It was here in the annex of the house that the hiding place was organized. We are here in the room of her parents and her sister and go to this room, the room where Anne Frank wrote her famous diary. It is one of the quotes from the diary: "I long to ride a bike. I dance, whistle, look at the world, feel young and know that I'm free." This was what she wrote in December 1943, when she was already for a year and a half trapped in this small space, only 7 square meters wide, and where she tried to make a living together with a man older than her father. She had to share this room with him, and this is where she wrote her diary. As you can see on the walls, she cut all kinds of pictures from magazines that she got from the outside world. We see pictures of celebrities, actors, royalties, famous artists, because that is also part of Anne Frank. She wanted to become a famous artist. A steep flight of stairs leads up to the 3rd floor, where the other family was in hiding, and that was being used as a living room during the day for all the 8 people in hiding. As you can see, it was dark. It still is, and it is the darkness of 25 months of hiding when they were afraid to be discovered, when all the windows were covered and that they were very afraid to use any electricity. June 12, 1942, Anne Frank turns 13 and gets this diary, which will be her favorite birthday present. She will write in a diary for the rest of her life. First in this book, and then in 2 other notebooks that are being saved by Μικρή, one of the helpers. Anne Frank wants to become a writer. Not just a writer, she wants to become a famous writer. Unfortunately, Anne Frank could not finish her book. It was her father who, in 1947, fulfills her dream and publishes the diary of his daughter. This is Otto Frank, a few hours before the opening of the Anne Frank house to the public in 1960, up in the attic of the secret annex. The house serves as a memory to the tragic fate of his family, but also as a message to all of us.